Greetings and blessings from all the sisters at the monastery. I'm Sister Pauline Micke, and I am currently the director of the Oblates, which is a lay men and women's group affiliated with St. Scholastica Monastery, in which we pray and live and study and talk about what it means for us to live the Benedictine way of life, the vision and values of Benedict in this day and age. For the presentation today, I used the title, The Benedictine, the Vision and the Task, Live On in Us, Bringing Hope. And that's a quotation that comes from Father Henry Nouwen, a noted spiritual writer who has now gone home to his reward. But the first time I heard it in a talk up at Scholastica, it just clicked with me, and I thought, that's what we're all about. The vision and the task, bringing hope. And so when he said a vision without a task is useless, and a task without a vision is just drudgery. But if you put the vision and the task together, then it's hope for everyone. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to just give you a whole bunch of dates for our history, etc. That's not usually my process. What I like to talk about is how you get to know us and what is the Benedictine vision and values through the lives of our sisters. Because they live it, and I always say, they put the flesh and blood on the vision and the values. So just a little brief history. We go back 1852, when three Benedictine sisters from St. Walburga's Abbey in Eichstätt in Bavaria came to Erie, Pennsylvania. Sister Benedicta Riepp, Sister Walburga Flieger, and Sister Mara Flieger and Sister Walburga Dietrich. They had been asked by some of the U.S. bishops to come because there were a number of immigrants, particularly from Germany, coming to the United States, and to come and help with the immigrants, and particularly with the children. They did, and 5 years later already, this will let you know that Benedictines don't let a lot of grass grow under their feet. By 1857, they went from Erie, Pennsylvania to the Benedictine sisters at St. Joseph, Minnesota, and they founded a house there. 1892, there were 32 sisters that came from St. Joseph's, Minnesota, and came to Duluth by the invitation of the bishop. And there they established a Benedictine convent in Duluth. The Bishop McGulrick, always says of Mother Scholastica, she built my diocese. And we still are. That's what we're about. They bought the land, they built, and they continued setting up schools. So by 1899, they had purchased 80 acres of land for $8,000. We always laugh about that. And it's important that you know, because people will refer to us as this, it was called the Daisy Farm because that's what it was. It was a farm. And the sisters did initially farm it, and by 1905, though, this is again to let you know that they don't sit still very long, they were already starting to build. And in 1906 and 1907, they added 2 more parcels of land, 40 acres each. So now we are up to the current amount of space that we have, which is 160 acres. In 1909, the sisters and students from the Sacred Heart Institute moved to our present site. Because when they first came to Duluth, they settled in Munger Terrace, which is at the top of Mesabi Avenue. People that go to Duluth know that. But by 1911, in the fall, they had already started the college with 6 students. So this college is not far behind the founding of the monastery. On the occasion of our 75th anniversary, Bishop Francis Schenck paid tribute to the Benedictine sisters of St. Scholastica Monastery with these words. He said, the sisters have given themselves wholeheartedly to the education of children in the grade and catechetical schools and to the students of the high school and college level. Right from the beginning, the Benedictine community in Duluth has been involved with two main ministries, that of education and that of healthcare. And they have committed themselves also, he said, to the care of the sick and the aged. And at the time he was speaking, we had already moved into having the care of children in St. James's Orphanage, which is now Woodland Hills. They have also extended their work far beyond this area. Already in the early 1900s, we had sisters who were working in the Archdiocese of Chicago, of Cincinnati, St. Paul, Minneapolis, in the dioceses of Tucson, Arizona, and already in Antofagasta, Chile. And Bishop Schenck says in his statement to us, he said, it is a growing service. And that is another phrase we've hung on to. He says, I wish to thank the Sisters of St. Scholastica Monastery most sincerely and to congratulate them on this 75th anniversary of what he called the constancy of their dedication to God and to God's people. That covers that beginning very fast history of us. And as we continue, what I'd like to do for the rest of our time together is to look at St. Scholastica Monastery, that Benedictine community that was destined to take seed and grow, and not only would it stay static, we've never been static, but it would move on to grow and to be entrusted with how our story continues to grow and develop. As I said, we've had those two areas, education and healthcare. But in the prologue to the Rule of St. Benedict, we have key words and images that continue to carve out and nurture our story. So the vision and task is always seen in context and is based on the foundation of what Benedict says in his rule. We always start out with, in the Rule of Benedict, the first word is listen. And he doesn't just say listen, he'll say that several times in the rule, but he says listen with the ear of your heart. And that's very key for Benedictines. That's right away in the prologue. And then he goes on in verse 4 to say, first of all, whatever good work you do and begin to do, you must pray to God most earnestly to bring it to perfection. So our vision and our tasks are always rooted in that foundation, what Benedict calls, you begin with prayer. And then he says in verses 10 and 11 of the prologue, you that have ears to hear, listen to what the Spirit says. So our vision and our task as we grow and develop and continue our lives among God's people is always guided by the Spirit, by God's Spirit. Chapter 36 is where Benedict talks about the care of the sick. And he says, the care of the sick must rank above and before all else, so that they may be truly served as Christ. For what you did to one of these least, you did for me. Now, these above qualities and characteristics that I've just very kind of speedily mentioned, they have been with the Benedictine sisters since the beginning. They were there. Benedicta Riepe and her companions brought them from Eichstätt in Bavaria. It is the vision and the values that have been part of the story we see and the story that we tell and that we build upon over and over again. In other words, it is a lived story as seen in the lives of our sisters. And you'll see that as I continue and give you some of what they've done. We've heard how they came from Germany to Pennsylvania, to Minnesota, and especially in our story, to Duluth, Minnesota. And they served in the schools they set up, the hospitals, the lumberjack camps. Everybody, I think, is sooner or later hears about Sister Amata, who was nicknamed the Lumberjack Sister, or Sister Lumberjack, because she would go into the lumberjack camps and she would sell these little health tickets. I always call them the first HMOs. And the lumberjacks would buy them, and then they could go to any of our hospitals, which were already in existence in northern Minnesota, if they needed care. In addition to the hospitals, the lumberjack camps, the schools, the churches, the thing about Benedictines is that they go wherever the need arises. And so what I'm going to continue to do now is to show you how, using the stories of the sisters' lives and how this community of St. Scholastica Monastery continues to serve and be servant leaders down to the present. How this Benedictine house took root in northern Minnesota, and it grew and it sends out ripe buds. As Bishop Schenck stated, it is a growing service. I firmly believe that the story comes alive, or as I always like to say it, our story is given flesh and blood through the lives of the sisters who continue to answer God's call and respond to the needs. Pope Francis, in one of his books, and some of the other spiritual writers talk about how in our lives we encounter God. And when we encounter God, with that encounter comes a call. And with that call, we must respond in some way or other. It may be to do what we are asked to do. It may be to do nothing. It may be to build on what is asked. But anyway, that we encounter, we get the call, and we accept the mission and continue from there. The story came alive in the United States, particularly northern Minnesota and some of the others that I've mentioned, but it also came alive for us in two different continents, South America in Chile and Africa in the country of Tanzania. And I'm going to talk about Chile first because in 1961, Pope John the 23rd, this was Vatican Council II, okay, and religious communities were asked by the Pope to send 10% of their community to Latin America to work with the people there. And God was indeed involved in our story because it was at that same time when one of the French-Canadian priests, he was a member of the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, wrote to Duluth and asked for help with what his project was in Chile. And so in 1963, it was Mother Athanasius Bregelman sent 4 sisters to Chile to start a mission. Sister Ricardo Berman, Sister Mary Paul Ludwig, Sister Sharon O'Neill, and Sister Victoria Jobin. Their initial thing was, first of all, to go to Mexico for immersion studies in Spanish, and then they traveled to Chile by boat. Sister Mary Paul became principal, of course, of the grade school. Those of us that know of her knows that she continued it even when she came back here. There were other sisters from other Benedictine communities that went, and Sister Patricia McAllister joined up with Sister Mary Paul, and they traveled throughout all of Chile, bringing more up-to-date teaching techniques for the teachers to learn and to work with the children. They were thrilled. All the sisters were very thrilled by this because what was happening was now the children were learning how to think and to comprehend instead of just simply learning by rote. And Sister Sharon had a unique method of teaching. She had a piece of chalk and a rag, okay? That was her, you might say, instruments of teaching. And she tried then to combine her teaching with a form of aerobics. So she tells the story of how they would take the children and they would jump and they would run and they would hop and anything that, and sing. Of course, they always had to sing, while teaching them new words. And so it became like a game, and the children loved it, and they learned a lot. One of the additional sisters that went down from our community was Sister Mary Susan DeWitt. She's a nurse, okay? She was the only nurse in the bunch initially. Sister Terry Spindler would go later. And Sister Mary Susan talks about how she faced the challenge of being a one-person clinic, so that there were always long lines of people, and there was always people that were full of hope and trust because the sisters would help them. But also, she said, there was never enough medicine or equipment. It's a story over and over and over again. We'll meet the same kind of thing when our sisters go to Africa. By 1979, though, this school in Antofagasta, Chile, was self-sustaining. And so it was time for our sisters to leave Antofagasta. But the vision and the task in Chile was not finished. And so we, in 1996, we began a collaborative relationship with Monasterio Santa Maria, which was a small community of contemplative Benedictine women in Ratan, Chile. They only had 12 members. This small Benedictine community in Ratan, Chile, became one of what we call our twinning communities. And I'll talk about the twinning communities in Africa a little bit later. Their sisters continue to be in relationship with us. They are a contemplative Benedictine community, so they're different than what we are used to with going out and teaching and working in hospitals, etc. They've had some very challenging issues in Chile, both with the government and with nature, with storms, etc. And we've helped them through some of those very challenging happenings. But they stay in touch. Their sisters write with our sisters. It's a way for us to learn more Spanish. And so that what we see is that in South America, the vision and the task continues to grow with both their community and with our community, because we're now in relationship with a group of women who come from a whole different culture and have a different way of experiencing and understanding the Benedictine way of life. Now, I mentioned that they were only one of our twinning communities. The other ones are in Africa, and particularly in the country of Tanzania. St. Agnes Convent in Chipoli and St. Gertrude Convent in Imiliwaha. These are international connections, and they broaden our concept of the meaning of hospitality and of what it means to be Benedictine, and to include new ways of being Benedictine. They help us see beyond our own borders and experiences, proving again that our 1,500 years of tradition continues to give life to cultures all over the world. And they may be different from our own culture, but it helps them grow and it helps us grow. Our relationship with the sisters in Tanzania is kind of very unique, because in 2002, Sister Beverly Raway, who is our current prioress, she at the time was teaching in the college. She has a doctorate in nursing, and she organized the first trip of students and some faculty from our college to go to Tanzania with medicine and so on, and to start dealing with those issues over there. And so that practice continues to right down to the day where our college has picked this up. And so these visits continue with the college and our students and faculty and so on. One of the unique outcomes of the Tanzanian sisters, because we would bring them over, they would live with our community, and they would go to school. They would get their education at St. Scholastica Monastery. So, and a lot of them, they would go into education or they would go into nursing. Right now, we have one living with us who is in psychology. And she came to us by a very kind of roundabout way too, because the college she was at here in the United States closed because of the COVID virus, etc. And so she transferred to our college. So she's living with us, but studying for psychology, which is something they can use over there also. But Sister Gaudensia is the one I want to mention because she's very unique. She got her education degree at St. Scholastica in the college. She went back to Tanzania, and you will see pictures of this. She and the other sisters, she started what would become, they actually made the bricks to build a school, and then they had to build a safety wall, a security wall around the school. But she graduated and then went back, and the school now is built for the children north of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. When I talk about how the seeds grow and ripen and continue, that this community of St. Gertrude's in Amiliwaha, in this past August 15th of 2019, they celebrated the 50th anniversary of their founding. So they've already been a community of Benedictines working there in Africa for 50-some years. What is important for us to understand is that the vision and the task continues to call us to help others to carry forth the hope that so many of these peoples need. I remember Sister Beverly when on her first trip over there in 2002, and she came back and she's talking to us, and of course tears in the eyes, and then pretty soon we all have tears in our eyes, because she says they're dying from diseases they don't need to die from. And that's why this particular ministry has continued so and grown so much, because there's so many people that need it and need to know that there's help. It's with the help and the generosity, because we couldn't do this alone as a community, and answering God's call, that so many lay people have come forth. And so we have a whole new ministry and spirituality of lay people that continues to grow. And each one of you watching this knows what I mean, because you're involved in it also. You continue to do this. I want you to remember that each day the Benedictine sisters in Duluth are deeply grateful that you have joined us in giving the vision and the task, the flesh and the blood, to our vision and task to help these people, and that God will bless you abundantly. My last ministry that I'd like to talk to you about, because it's one we haven't talked about much, at least in the other presentations I've given, deals with our Sister Timothy Kirby, who was chaplain at the college and worked in the high school and all of this. But Sister Timothy began a prison ministry. She was asked by Bishop Roger Schweitz of Duluth if she would consider to be the chaplaincy position out at the federal prison. And she said no, she didn't like administrative work, but she said she would begin to teach them and to offer workshops for them. So on Wednesday nights, she would do scripture studies out at the federal prison. The monastery helped her with buying Sunday to Sunday, which is a commentary on scripture for the prisoners and so on. She would preside at their worship and communion services, and then during the week there would be a priest that would go out there to celebrate the Eucharist. In speaking about her work, Sister Timothy said, "So many of these Minn are really good people who made mistakes." She was a key part of their spiritual growth. How they came to look more deeply into their own lives and how they changed their priorities and discovered that they needed God in their lives and they needed to live a different way than what they had been living. One of the wonderful little stories I found in the write-up about Sister Timothy and her prison ministry is that twice she got suspended from working at the federal prison because she didn't follow the rules. One was a prisoner had given her a hug because they had talked about something and she had helped him, and she hugged him back, and that wasn't supposed to happen there yet. There's very strict rules at the federal prison. And secondly, she had talked on the phone with this one prisoner, and he was not cleared to have phone calls. So twice she got suspended. But that was Timothy, because what she was doing, putting flesh and blood on this vision and task, was more important than following, the set of rules according to their timeline. And so we always laughed about that. And she continued that ministry until shortly before her death on December 22nd in 2010. But the important thing for us to realize is that before she died, she had begun to get lay men and women, and you'll see this in pictures, 5 of them, to help her at the prison when she couldn't be there and when she could no longer continue. And that ministry was continued by these faithful and faith-filled people: Donna Effinger, Jim Doyle, Elizabeth Liebenstein, Dick Larson, and John Herberts. These men and women are dedicated to our Benedictine vision and values. They continue to hear and respond to the vision and the tasks and the needs that come out of it. Now, several other sisters also helped out with the prison ministry. Sister Mary Ray Higgins was one that helped with the prison's ministry. And as time went on, because I was a counselor downtown for 9 years working with people with different addictions, I also got involved in this, serving at St. Louis County Jail and Carlton County Jail and Arrowhead Juvenile Detention Center. And some of this branched out also into how we served those who were being abused, such as the women at Safe Haven. I would go there every Friday and do what we called life management issues, because so often all of these issues, they're not nice, cut and clean, it's a lifestyle. And so we have to deal with the whole lifestyle. The other one that used to help out was Sister Alicia Panger. She used to walk the hills in Central Hillside and help people who had need of it. I always think of her as our mobile ministry. She wasn't that big, but she would go up and down those hills. I think this ministry to prisoners and to our adolescents in detention centers and to those who are abused, Jim Doyle was a person that put it into words that these men and women, what they experienced in their ministry. We always think of what they're giving to others, but Jim summed it up in terms of what they received. He was with Sister Tim at her last meeting with the prisoners, and he says, "I watched as she was stepping down from the altar with 2 large men, one on each side of her, carefully guiding her. And he said they were near tears. They knew she was near the end of her life on earth. She was not well. And she said, he said, I cannot put into words the lessons that I have learned from my ministry at the prison." And that again is another ministry that continues. And so with your commitment and partnering with us, the story continues to be told. Each one of you are another instrument, another agent, if you want to talk about that, another way of empowering that the flesh and blood gets developed for the vision and the task. because we continue to encounter God. We continue to hear the calls of the people that need help. And we continue, hopefully, to enter each day into the process of living and giving flesh and blood to the vision and the task that has been entrusted to the Benedictine sisters of St. Scholastica Monastery, and for the countless men and women that we have contacted and connected with, and who have committed to also being part of this sacred trust that we have received. And so we thank all of you who have entered into living and serving with us. I'd like to close with these words from the Prologue of St. Benedict. Listen with the ear of your heart. First of all, every time you begin a good work, you must pray to God most earnestly to bring it to perfection. If we base our ministry on that, and with the connection between you and the sisters, it bears fruit, as we see, not only just in our country and in northern Minnesota, but as far as other continents. And that will continue. They will take, whether it's South America or whether it's Africa, they will take what they've learned and what we have helped bring to them and continue to grow. So as we encounter God's call, saying yes to it in our own lives, connecting with others, let us pray that God will continue to bless us and give us what we need to live and carry out the vision and the task that has been entrusted to us, that the story and the hope may continue. May each and every one of you be blessed.